Here's the pattern slow. Let's just do one more 16th note pattern through a scale, once again using one of the fragments that we learned earlier. Here it is slow. See if you can recognize the fragments in this one. Okay, now that we have all the scalar technique under our hands, let me show you how this can be applied to improvising. I'm going to solo over progression in D minor, basically using D, Dorian, and D minor scales, and I'm going to throw in a couple of these 16th note runs, and you can see the way it interacts with the melodies and whatnot. And once you get a taste of this, maybe you can try it in your own solos. When I first started playing, I probably had some of the same typical influences that kids my age had. It's like Black Sabbath and Zeppelin and The Who and Iron Maiden, and then I started to get more drawn towards the guitar players. And as I played more, I was drawn to players that really had unique style. I was really into Rush and Alex Lifeson and Steve Howe with Yes, Randy Rhoads, and then I finally discovered Steve Morse, and my life changed. I heard the Bash for the first time, and I was just like, this is unreal. Got every Dregs album, and started getting into Steve and the Dregs, and Al Di Meola and Alan Holdsworth. I had a similar experience here in Stevie Ray Vaughan for the first time, like just blown away. One of the more difficult techniques for most guitarists is using alternate picking through arpeggios. Now this has been something that's been difficult for me for a while, and it's actually making me kind of mad, so I analyzed what the problem was, and I came up with an interesting A little fact. First of all, the problem always seemed to arise when I was encountering what I call inside the string picking. Now that to me is really difficult because it seems like your pick is kind of trapped in between these two strings, as opposed to playing on the outside of the strings like this, where it feels like you have a bit more freedom of motion. To experiment and see if this is a problem for you, I suggest playing two notes on adjacent strings, let's say A on the G string and D on the B string, and first try picking them starting with a downstroke and then with an upstroke. And let's see how that feels. Try it at various tempos, see how fast you can get it. Now do the same thing, but start on an upstroke and go up, down, up, down. You're going to encounter that inside of the string picking phenomena. Let's try that. Now my right hand immediately starts to tense up as soon as I encounter that inside of the string technique, and I think it's because I feel like I'm sort of trapped and I have no range of motion. This is usually a problem for most guitar players. Some guys have this taken care of, and we'll have to shoot them all. But anyway, how do you practice this? How do you get around this? Well, very simply, you just practice the motion that you're having a problem with. Now, this could be very boring if you sit there doing that for any period of time that's going to make it effective. So what I've done is I've come up with a little etude that practices and concentrates on the inside of the string picking. And by the way, if you ever have something that you're trying to work on and you need to develop it, come up with some little progression or etude or song. It makes it a lot more interesting. So let me demonstrate it for you now slow, and then I'll play it up to tempo. Now I'm going to demonstrate this up to speed with the metronome. Make sure that the pick strokes are even and that you maintain, in this case, down, up, down, up, down, up, because we're starting on a higher string and going to a lower string, which once again makes us encounter this inside of the string technique. So here we go. Now that exercise specifically narrows down the problem and concentrates only on that problem. But the thing is, you're going to encounter this picking hang-up through an arpeggio. In other words, some part of the arpeggio you'll have no problem playing, and other parts you might have this inside of the string thing. Let me demonstrate on a major arpeggio. If I play G major in the 7th position, I have down, up, down, up. Now the initial down, up isn't a problem. Either is the next down. But it's when you go to the D on the G string, you have the inside of the string picking down, up. So in order to play that quickly, you're going to have to overcome that little problem right there. So once again, instead of practicing that same arpeggio over and over, I came up with another little etude that incorporates major and minor arpeggios, and that picking hang-up is kind of snuck in the middle of the arpeggios. So it's not just only concentrating on that, but it's incorporating it into a larger picture. Here it is slow. Now I've added an extra challenge to this one because not only are we working on the picking hang-up, but we're skipping strings while doing that hang-up. Let me show you where that happens. Right over here between the D and its octave, between the D and the C, between the D and the B. You're playing up, down, and also trying not to hit the B string while you're at it. Here it is up to tempo. I first picked up the guitar when I was 12, and I didn't take any formal lessons. I took music theory my last 2 years in high school, so I had 2 years of that, and I went to Berklee right out of high school. A couple of times I had some scattered lessons before Berklee. I took a few lessons to try to prepare myself, and I remember going to group classes with a friend of mine, but I never really took any formal continuous lessons. By the time I went to Berklee, I had been working on technique and chops and stuff like that, and I had a couple of years of classical music theory. So when I came into Berklee, all the things like arranging and sight singing and harmony and a jazz perspective, I had no clue. So I remember taking the placement and just getting in like level 1 of everything and starting from scratch. And I think that the most I learned there was in harmony and about chord structure and progressions, and also how to continue to learn, because that was one of the things that I kind of picked up on, is that there's such a resource out there, whether you're going to school or not. I mean, it's great to go to school because you have the discipline of going every day, but there's just so many resources out there, and the students that really applied themselves, whether it was to the library, the listening rooms, or attending recitals, they really excelled. And the ones that just kind of sat there and thought it was all going to come to them eventually weren't there anymore. Now I'd like to concentrate on left hand strength. What we're going to do is we're going to work on some scale fragments once again, but instead of picking them, we'll play them legato. In other words, we'll use all hammer-ons and pull-offs. And basically, I'm going to show you a couple of different patterns, and then I'll show you how to practice them. So let's start with the legato patterns. Okay, this is how we're going to practice these. You're going to play each pattern to a watch this time for a minute each. If you feel like you need more, you can do each for 2 minutes or 3 if you'd like. The idea is to not stop. Do one exercise into the next, a minute each. And you can play them at varying speeds. Just make sure that the notes are clean and that you're using complete legato technique. Now, with the last couple, notice I did pick, except I only picked when I was ascending from the D string to the G. Happened right over here. So in this case, it was on the C sharp. That's the only other time you're going to pick. Also, when you practice these, you don't have to stay in the positions that I just showed. You can practice them on any string. You could stretch your fingers out. You can play them in any position, in any key, diatonically or chromatically. Let me demonstrate a little bit. Remember, 1 minute each without stopping. That's the idea. Okay, once you get those all practiced, I suggest that you do our little massage thing that we talked about in the beginning, and also stretch your wrists, because it's time to take those fragments and put them into expanded sequences through scales using very little picking. Once again, this is called legato. Here's the first exercise. Okay, basically what I did is I took one of the fragments, the one that went like this, and also another one that went like this, and combined them ascending through an A major scale. Descending, we shifted up to the next position in the key and worked our way back down the scale. Let me play the 2 scale positions by themselves, just so you know what they sound like straight through. And you can practice that sequence between any 2 positions in any key, or even using nonsense patterns, just shifting up by half steps, maybe something like this. Now let's hear the original pattern up to speed. Here's one more legato example. This one is in the key of E minor, and it shifts positions quite a number of times. So practice it slowly and make sure that you get those position shifts clean and clear. This also involves some right hand tapping. Here it is slow. Let's break this down into segments so you can practice each section and then put it all together. It's basically ascending in 3 octaves, and the pattern repeats. Here it is. So it's starting on F sharp and ending on E, and then starting on F sharp an octave higher, the exact same thing, and then 1 octave higher, starting on the B string. So this is a perfect example of practicing segments and then connecting all of them to get the whole run, because you might just want to practice each octave at a time. Then put it together. When you get to the top, you're tapping the G on the high E string, and it's basically a double tap. And then you're tapping A, and then back down to G. So you could practice that small fragment a few times and get that under your fingers. And descending, we have another 3 octave pattern. So you can practice each one of them as a fragment and just master that octave. And then put them all together. Now I'm going to play the whole thing, ascending and descending up to tempo. When we first started the band, we were all 17 or 18 years old. So the last album that we just put out, I mean, it's like almost 10 years later. So I think we've all matured as songwriters, and you know, we listen to the old demos and whatnot, and there's bootlegs of those demos and stuff, and it's just like, oh my God, what were we thinking, you know? So the music and writing has definitely evolved. To wrap up the topic of technique, I'd like to introduce a different style of picking other than alternate. It's called sweep picking, and some of you may be familiar with this technique, some of you may not be, but in either case I'd like to offer you my exercises and things like that that basically isolate the technique, and then you can expand and apply it to things that you might already know. Now, I usually apply sweep picking to arpeggios and not really to scalar examples. And I also use it in a way where it's sort of a weapon or a tool to execute a fast flurry of notes. Let me show you a couple of exercises that work on the technique. All right, there's 2 things to keep in mind when working on this exercise. One of them is to separate the notes of the left hand. In other words, you're not playing chords, but you're separating the notes and playing arpeggios. And also, with the right hand, you want to separate the notes as well. In other words, don't strum them all together, but push down on the pick so it knocks into the next string, sort of falling from string to string. You don't want to make separate motions like this. You want to push the pick down, 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 and then up, 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 pushing against the strings. Now you can actually mute the strings and work on just the right hand. You don't want it to sound like this. You want the separation. The left hand pattern is very similar to some of the warm-up exercises we were doing. It involves 4-finger mirror type shapes. It starts 1, 2, 3, 4. Then reverse and go 1, 2, 3, 4 again, starting on the high E. Move up a half step and play 4, 3, 2, 1 from the D to the E string. Do the mirror image and play 4, 3, 2, 1 from the E to the D. Here it is again. And then simply move it up, continuing in half steps. You can also play this on different string groups if you want. Okay, just as a fun variation, you can take this technique and just mutate the notes of the left hand, and I came up with, once again, another etude using the sweeping technique. It goes like this.